Hello and welcome to the Wisdom Workshop. Please like the video and subscribe with all notifications turned on so that you won't miss any of our wisdom improving videos. This is Norway. Norway is a fascinating nation that has served as the model for how a socialist-capitalist mixed economy should be run. The nation ranks amongst the top for GDP per capita, just behind Switzerland and a limited group of micronations. The nation has a healthy trade surplus, one of the world's best life expectancies, a highly trained workforce with the largest percentage of university graduates, an extraordinarily low unemployment rate, and a reputation as a location where doing business is quite simple. The fact that Norway has accomplished this while simultaneously being one of the most economically equal nations in the world is even more amazing. After taxes, a single person from Norway's poorest 20% of earners still acquires on average only a quarter of what their top 20% would. Even while this still seems unjust, the average income of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's top 5 earners is 10 times more than that of the poorest fifth, making the fourfold difference between the two groups strikingly equal. When looking at working circumstances, the good news continues. Norway has a very strong worker rights, therefore societal problems like individuals having second jobs to support themselves or working incredibly long hours are relatively uncommon. In fact, according to the OECD Better Life Index, just 3% of employees work extremely long hours, which is far less than the OECD average of 11% or the American average of 33%. All of this helps explain why Norwegians are among the happiest people in the world, despite the fact that their nation spends half the year like this. So, what is this mystery then? Why haven't other nations implemented comparable economic policies to those in Norway, which by all rights should be the example that most citizens would like to follow in their own countries? Is this nation merely a lucky exception, or may other economies throughout the world duplicate the same success? As a matter of fact, Norway has not always been as affluent. Let's take a look at Norway in the 1960s. It had a fishing-based economy with a GDP comparable to third-world countries like Bangladesh or Nigeria. To be fair, Norway's population was then and continues to be far lower than that of these and other nations, and the ordinary Norwegian enjoyed a standard of living comparable to that of their European neighbors in Greece and Spain. However, Norway was still a long way from being the economic powerhouse it is today in the 1960s. But things began to change in May 1963 when the Norwegian government declared its sovereign rights over the North Sea's natural resources. This was essentially the government declaring that this ocean is ours and that we also own any oil that may be discovered there. Now, unfortunately, when Norway tried out this nationalizing business in the 1960s, it didn't have the same level of independence as other nations since it was a member of NATO. Nonetheless, a ship by the name of Ocean Viking found oil in the North Sea 6 years later in 1969. As a result, oil output in the area skyrocketed, reaching 1.6 million barrels per day. As a result also, Norway produced more oil per capita than any other nation in the world in the middle of the 1970s, and it still does so today, behind only Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. I get what you're thinking, but this isn't a tale of some other nation that suddenly became wealthy thanks to its oil reserves, with everyone living like a newly signed football star. In fact, the Norwegian government was very careful with the money it received from these limited resources, not becoming intoxicated off the oil wealth it had found. In the 1970s, the oil boom led Norway's GDP to increase by more than 5 times, from $12 billion to $65 billion. However, Statoil, a publicly owned and operated corporation, was producing this enormous income rather than a private company like Shell, Exxon, or BP. This meant that the government would get the proceeds from the sale of oil and natural gas rather than private stockholders. This made the Norwegian government extremely wealthy, allowing them to easily embark on a public spending spree to construct opulent towns and public infrastructure while simultaneously lowering taxes, as many other nations have done in a similar situation. In the short term, this strategy would have meant lower taxes and an improvement in the quality of life, making it highly popular with the populace. However, it didn't happen, and income and company taxes in Norway are still among the highest in the world. Fortunately though for Norway, the government understood that the country's oil wealth would eventually run out and that its people would not be content if they had to return to fishing in a few generations. Therefore, the government placed the funds in a sovereign wealth fund, a very sizable piggy bank. In fact, this is the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, surpassing China's state investment company, which is amazing given that China's population is 270 times more than Norway's. The Norwegian people should get the proceeds from the sale of these resources because they originally owned the oil and other natural resources, and they should also be the ones to benefit from the money. In essence, every man, woman, and kid who is a citizen of Norway has about $200,000 invested in a massive hedge fund as a result. Unfortunately though, these folks no longer have access to this money to spend on super yachts or Lamborghinis with gold plating. The Norwegian government can't even access the money itself. Actually, only the profits from these investments are utilized to finance initiatives like education, shops to describe the highly qualified workers, a solid welfare system, public infrastructure, and of course, reinvestment into the fund itself. From its investments, the fund earned an astounding $131 billion in 2017. The portfolio of equities, bonds, cash, and commodities in this fund are quite varied, but what it invests in is not nearly as intriguing as what it does not. The Norwegian government established an ethical council to regulate investment decisions, and it has prohibited investing in industries including tobacco, weapons manufacturing, and businesses that have severely harmed the environment or violated employees' rights and labor regulations. Additionally, the fund is prohibited from investing in fossil energy firms in an effort to diversify where they source their funding. Perhaps most intriguingly, there's one nation on the earth where investing is outright prohibited. You can probably guess which one that is by now, and that one is Norway. This indicates that all of this fund's investments are genuinely made in overseas securities and commodities. Now, despite the significant political impact Norway has on foreign businesses, this also implies that the performance of the fund is independent of the Norwegian economy. Now, this fund was a magnificent example of foresight on the part of the Norwegian government, and it effectively makes Norway the equivalent of the person who wins the lottery but continues his day job and puts his winnings into a stock portfolio on a national level. Effectively, they'll be safe and secure for future generations, even if it's undoubtedly not as cool and attention-grabbing as wasting it all on extravagant displays of riches. In order to conclude, it is only reasonable to examine some of Norway's economic problems. First and foremost is that its cost of living is still significantly higher than its average pay. Given the extremely high taxes, the average Norwegian worker only receives roughly $3,200 per month in income. Although this is significantly more than the monthly average of $2,732 in the US, it doesn't go as far because Norway is an expensive country. In America, a lunch at a mid-range restaurant typically costs $50 for two people without beverages. Expect to spend around $92 in Norway. A new very basic family vehicle, like a base model Volkswagen Golf, can be purchased in America for about $20,000. But in Norway, the identical vehicle would cost you $36,473, which is especially amusing given how close the location of the vehicle's manufacturing is. The majority of Norwegians do believe, however, that they're content to put up with these high taxes and this very high cost of living in exchange for not having to worry about experiencing severe financial difficulty. Nobody in Norway has to worry about taking on terrible debt to pay for their education, and they're not afraid of losing their homes if they lose their employment, nor are they afraid of going bankrupt because of medical issues. Is Norway's economy actually ideal? Should that be the thing that each treasurer posts a poster over their bed to gaze upon at night? Well, not really. We all know that we're enormous lovers of planned social democratic economic systems, and Norway is a superb example of such a system. Although Norway has done everything correctly with the possibilities provided to them, they were still incredibly fortunate, and it would be ludicrous to think that any other country could achieve the same success by just copying and pasting Norway's present economic policies. Having said that, Norway ought to be your starting point if you find yourself in control of a nation that has struck oil riches or is experiencing another economic boom. Thank you for watching this video. Please do like and subscribe with all notifications turned on so that you won't miss any of our economic videos.